So really glad to be with you guys. And as Mr. Krause was mentioning, he wanted me to say a little bit about how I got to where I am. And I was fortunate to meet Mr. Krause at a time where we were celebrating something really big, and that was the Apollo moon landing a long time ago, long before you guys were born. But a really big thing in my life, because it was so inspirational as a little guy to watch people walking on the moon. And it was definitely one of the things that kind of pointed me towards this path that I've chosen to get me into space. And what I want to do is show a couple of pictures that kind of show my path of education. And it's really all about the education. It's all about the school. And I hope you guys really love your school, because I certainly did. And it had a big influence on me. So first, just a little bit about school. There was one other thing that really influenced me, and I'm betting that most of you guys, except the adults in the room, are way too young to know who the guy in the middle is, but that's Dr. McCoy from the original Star Trek series. And that came out about the same time that we walked on the moon. And I was just really intrigued with the idea that there could be medicine in space. I mean, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And the guys around him are other doctors from other Star Trek spin-offs and whatnot. But that to me was really cool, because it meant that you could have this combination of adventure and exploration and medicine and science, and all those things rolled into one place. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be amazing if there ever were such a reality, if you could ever actually do something like that. Well, it didn't occur to me at the time that I ever would, but it's something you kind of grow into. I do like to remind people that we've got people on board the space station always, and these are the 6 people that are up there right now. There's 2 Russians, an Italian, and 3 Americans. It's a very international crew, and for the most of you, as long as you've been alive, you've actually had people on the space station. They're men and women from all different countries, and I do like to highlight my friends Jessica Meir and Christina Cook here, who went out on the first 2 women EVA just about 3 Saturdays ago, and they really rocked it. I mean, it was really, really cool. We're quite proud of them. Now, a little bit towards school. So I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and this is the little farmhouse I grew up in. Yes, it was black and white. Everything was very drab back then. No, just kidding. This was just black and white film, which probably some of you guys don't even know what it is. But it was a really good way to grow up, because I was always fixing things. And believe me, in space, you're always fixing things. But that's where I went through my elementary, grade school, middle school, and I graduated from Camas High School. Now, it didn't look like this, actually. This is the new one. The Camas High School that I graduated from was built in 1903 and condemned and destroyed shortly after I left. It had nothing to do with my being there. But nonetheless, I really enjoyed my time going through middle school and high school. Some of my lifelong friends were made there. And I had teachers that really pointed me towards math and science without really knowing what I would ever do with them. They pointed out that, yeah, you're not going to pollute your mind with excess knowledge. This stuff may be useful to you, and it will enable you to find things that otherwise, if you didn't know them, would be sort of out of your reach. And so even coming out of there, I just loved everything about math and science. And not that I was 100% good at it or even the best at it, not by a long shot. But to me, it was just really interesting, and you could really apply it to so many things in life. And I went to the University of Washington for 4 years, so that's the university, and I did my training in marine zoology, of all things. And that was another thing that I was kind of interested in. I was kind of nurturing this interest as we went. And it's a very beautiful place, by the way, up in Seattle and close to the water. And there were laboratories that you could learn in there, and that again kind of sparked that interest as well. But by that time, I had already gone through a phase of about 4 years of wanting to be nothing but an astronomer, and then at some points I wanted to be a pilot or a photographer, and so you started coming out with a little bit of career anxiety in a way, like you're interested in so many things, what do you do? But just really liking so many things, I think was a huge thing for me. A long story short, I met this person who was going to medical school, and I followed her and married her, and then we went to medical school together, and that's not a joke. That's kind of what happened. And I went to Northwestern University Medical School, which is located in Chicago, by the way, and that was 4 years. And then I did another 4 years of residency there in internal medicine. And all along the way, I didn't lose any of those other interests. I was still really interested in marine science and earth science and astronomy and flying. And I actually completed my pilot's license while I was in Chicago. I was kind of moonlighting during residency to pay for flying lessons because it was just really so interesting to me. And along the way, I totally by accident discovered this journal called Aviation, Space, and Environmental Medicine. I was like, what is this? So I read it. It's hard to believe, was before the internet. And there was a little sticker on there to the person that had actually subscribed to this journal. And I found him in the phone book. I called him up and I said, what is aerospace medicine? And he talked to me for a couple hours. He was an amazing guy, Colonel Brown. And he said it combines high altitude and fast jets and high G forces and acceleration and underwater diving medicine all into one thing, environmental medicine, that you combine with what you know of the human body and how we react and how we perform in extreme environments. And I thought, man, this may be it. This may be the thing that puts everything together into one place. And I got really, really excited about it. And so when I finished that 8 years in medical training, I actually did another medical residency, which was in aerospace medicine. There really is such a thing. Excuse me. And this was in Dayton, Ohio. So I spent another 2 years at Wright State University and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They're right next to each other. And I did a residency in aerospace medicine and got a master's degree in aerospace physiology. Now, if any of you are keeping track or doing math there, that means that once I finished college, I went to school for another 10 years, right? So that sounds formidable, right? It sounds like a lot of time in school, and it was, make no mistake. But let me just say that, one of the things that is most common among the astronauts, and I would say all the people that work at NASA, the space program, is we just love learning new things. And the further you go in your education, the more interesting it gets, the more relevant it gets. It's very applied to what you are interested in. And another thing that happens is as you go further in your education, the people around you become more and more like-minded. There are more people that kind of think like you because you're settling towards something that really excites you. And that was really cool. That was certainly true in my place. So when I finished all of that, it was way back in 1991 when I first came to the Johnson Space Center. And I've never left, actually, so it's a long time. But that's what it looks like. That's, in fact, where we are right now, the NASA Johnson Space Center down just southeast of Houston, Texas. And the weather's always like that. No, it's not, actually. It's very cold and rainy and blustery these last couple of days. But it is actually a beautiful place. And, it does seem like I went to school for a long time because the track I chose, which was space medicine, takes a lot more training even than most things that we require for people who come to NASA to work in the space program. But it really paid off and really was worth it. Now, I was lucky enough to become a NASA flight surgeon. What just happened?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. In 1991, and I was really, really happy doing that because I got to work with the astronauts, I got to support missions, I worked in mission control, I got to do research in space medicine, and I helped develop some of the medical kits that we fly in space so that if the astronauts get sick or hurt, they can do something about it. And I got to know a lot of the astronauts actually and worked with the Russian program a lot. So it was all these things that were really, really cool to me. And this is one of my favorite pictures from those early years because on the left there is Norm Thagard. He was the first U.S. astronaut who flew on the Mir station. And in the middle is me and my friend Peggy Whitson. And this is long before either of us became astronauts. So way back when. And my good friend David Ward there on the right, who was also a spaceflight surgeon. And I spent 9 years doing that, kind of being a doctor to the astronauts and working on the medical program for the International Space Station. So those are really, really some of the funnest years of my life. And it at that point never really occurred to me even to be an astronaut. But it was a combination of things that partly as we worked more with the Russians, it was all about long duration flight rather than the really short shuttle flights we were doing. And long duration flight is how we're going to get somewhere. That means months in space. whether you're in low Earth orbit or eventually on your way to Mars. And that's what the Russians were doing long before we were. And they were very good at it. And they have become some of my best friends, in fact. And so that made me interested enough to think maybe being an astronaut would be pretty cool. And I was studying the human body in space. And as much as I was teaching the astronauts about what was going to happen to their body in space, I'd never been there. So that was another thing that kind of made me think about it. And talking to some of the astronauts that I got to know really well, they said, look, you really should apply. And they pointed out that one of the common factors of all the people that get selected is none of us thought it would be us. So, you know, you got to play to win. So I put my hat in the ring, and I was really lucky enough to be selected to the astronaut class of 2000. And this is my classmates. So we're 17 of us. So 16 of kind of like what's become my closest friends gathered for this picture. That was probably the most well-behaved we've ever been, actually, before and since. But anyway, so I have been in the astronaut office since the year 2000. Now, I'm not going to end without showing you a little bit of smoke and fire. So hopefully our sound is going to come through here. But
it will not.
Okay, so we won't have sound, but this is how it was to launch in space on the space shuttle. This was the Space Shuttle Discovery on its last mission. And all that training, all those years, one of the biggest moments that kind of came down to this. So it was really cool to launch on this thing. It's just like somebody shakes your house in a storm and then hurls it into the sky when those engines light. And it takes about 8 minutes and 45 seconds or so to get into orbit. And this next view is from the booster that is going to burn out of fuel and separate. We continue up into orbit. That's our space shuttle and our external tank. And those things would fall into the ocean and be reclaimed. And after, again, about 8 minutes and 45 seconds of shake, rattle, and roll, you were in space. It was pretty cool. Now, I think a lot of you have heard the term STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And for us, we really take it seriously. And a lot of people hear that and they think that means really hard school and lots of homework. And it's only for the guys who want to be scientists or engineers. But there's a very interesting thing about where we live and how we live now, is that our society is very dependent on science and technology and engineering and math. And you learn these things so that you can actually be a better citizen, so that you understand what you're voting on, the technology you're using every day. It's not just for people who want to become these things. It's really important for all of us to learn. And you never know when and how you might use these things. Now, I'm a medical doctor, but trust me, I use math pretty much every day. And it's really become important to us to realize that this is for everybody. It's really not just for people who are going into science and technology. On the other hand, if you do want to go into something scientific, like work for the space program, you must be grounded in these things. And you shouldn't think of them as something that only smart people can do. It's something that anybody can do if they work hard enough. And again, I'm living proof. I can tell you, I'm no Einstein. I just worked hard at this stuff, and I enjoyed it. So I'm going to end my slides with some of the things that are the most important to me. That, you know, again, it's hard work that gets you where you want to be. It's not genius. Believe me, there's not that many geniuses at NASA, but there's a lot of really hard workers who are really passionate about what they do. And the other thing in the upper left there, curiosity, I think that is the fuel for us. That really runs us. You know, we want to learn stuff. And most of us are, like I say, we're happiest when we're learning new things. And so after all that schooling, again, I went to 4 years of college and then 10 years of education after that. I came to NASA, and it's like I've been in school ever since, because you're always learning new things, which to me is really, really cool. And I like to point out that, you know, you find your peers, you find people who think like you, who want kind of the same things you do. And those people you mostly find while you're in your schooling years, in your education. The best friends that you'll ever make are going to be in school. And again, the further you go, the more like-minded people you encounter. And again, you build those friendships, which just serve everybody incredibly well.